Hello people, Nico here. Before I start this science video, I want to thank Dark Knight for providing me with the link to this research paper that I will discuss with you guys today. The link for the paper is found in the description for anyone who wants to do some independent science reading themselves, and I will try to explain to you guys what has science unraveled so far about the monogamous behavior and attachment in a mammal species. Following the end of this video, I will be taking an extended hiatus from the community. Any videos uploaded will be long-winded discussions with people I feel have something to say, and currently that number seems to be diminishing. And despite that fact, I will be leaving the content up for anyone who wants to use it still. So enjoy the video and take care, guys. We have often called within MGTOW the attachment between two people, the love spell, as a drug or perhaps an addiction of sorts. The addiction to one person has a distinct biochemical profile and activates certain pathways in the brain that involve the areas seen with addictive substances such as cocaine. In the past, Barbarossa called for the need of a man to be with a woman as male mother need, an all-encompassing hug of acceptance and care, and in my earliest videos I called this effect the heroin effect. Puzzling as it may seem at first, it would appear that the interaction between a man and a woman can feel like an addiction of sorts, and it would appear that our observations of human behavior have a distinct biological basis that I would like to speak about here. This will focus specifically on the monogamous behavior of our species, serial monogamy, and the like, and explain the biological mechanisms that could be affecting this behavior in men and women alike. The paper quoted here does not use humans as a subject matter. However, what it chooses to use is two different species of voles, one monogamous and one not. The reason as to why the choice is made in the subjects chosen for these experiments is the ethics involved with utilizing humans and also the relatively short lifespan of voles, which can be used as good experimentation models. To anyone who may predict that these experiments may indeed be not applicable to humans, I want to note that most of the research initially starts with mammals, which are related to humans, and then gets transferred to human beings most of the time. Voles and other smaller mammals have very distinct brain neurochemistry and are ideal subjects as their neurochemistry is similar to ours, even though they're far away from other primates in terms of how relatable they are to us. It would be wise though to assume that if we're talking about attachment behaviors and sexual relationships, that such a primitive behavior could of course be maintained in a species such as ours. The behavior would either be similar or completely alike when seen on the brain, therefore this research paper can help us draw conclusions on human beings as a whole. Between the two species of vole, differences were found that explained in part the differences in their behavior with regards to long-term pair bonding. One of the main differences found is the presence of the vasopressin receptor in the brain. That means that this receptor was found in different concentrations and in different parts of the brain. The receptor is virtually unchangeable in its DNA sequence between the two different species of vole and humans for that matter. However, it would appear that a difference in the concentration of these receptors creates a different mode of pair bonding, one monogamous and one short-term. The fundamental difference in the expression of this specific gene seems to be found in the promoter of the gene sequence, that is, the sequence of DNA prior to the gene that activates it. This sequence is a highly unstable microsatellite sequence which seems to be quite variable between the two species. This highly variable sequence seems to be the one responsible as to how much this gene gets expressed. In humans, this variability is also seen, and the differences seem to be not as distinct as the ones seen in these two different species of voles. Therefore, we have to assume that there is monogamous behavior in most humans that's inborn, and there is a biological basis of it, although there will be variation to the length of that relationship or the length of the time that the attraction is maintained between those two humans. When these genes for the vasopressin receptor were put on a viral promoter, which could be activated at will by the scientists, they managed to prove that the promotion of the presence of the receptor leads to monogamous relationships and also closer interactions with other members of the species. This means that this receptor is also involved in social interaction in general. What the researchers also managed to show is that the neural pathways that get activated during engagement of these receptors leads to activation of the dopaminergic pathways. That means that the vasopressin receptors, the ones that are pointed out as likely to be influencing the long-term pair bonding between members of the same species, also activate the pleasure pathways, leading to addictive behaviors between the two involved parties. Yes, it would seem that love is a drug, as we have prophesied many times before. These dopaminergic pathways are also activated following taking any drug of addiction, any high-calorie meal, and of course it shows in any love spell. However, as with any drug, the effect of it fades away with time as you get accustomed to the stimulus. With drugs of addiction, people and experimental mice, for example, would up their dose if they could. Unfortunately, though, you cannot up the dose when it comes to human beings. Sometimes short periods of separation have been said to reignite feelings because the drug effect gets reintroduced as strong as it was before. However, in long term, the effect does fade away. It is why generally people reported their emotions fading with time in long-term relationships. In the past, such as the past where people used to live in caves, this would mark the point in time at which the offspring would be less dependent on the mother, and that would predict the dissolution of the relationship between man and woman. In present times, in marriages that may last longer or in relationships where such things do last a bit longer at times, then we must predict that there is a certain codependence between the two people that is perhaps keeping them together. Such codependence could of course not mean that the pathways involved in them are different, but it may very well mean that people are staying together either because of habit, because of the evolution of their relationship to perhaps friendship, because of the financial constraints that would be brought about with the divorce, or perhaps the well-being of the children, as it would seem it's advantageous for them if the parents do stay together. And of course, as many married men and people in long-term relationships have also found, after the dissolution of their relationships, their pleasure levels seem to plummet, because there is still a certain pleasure that comes from the association with the other party, but is now considered to be the new norm. The new norm that completely disappears when that relationship is completely dissolved. In summary, the experimentation with voles has shined a different light on the biology of monogamy. It has shown us that there is a neurochemical basis of it, with receptors such as the vasopressin receptor playing a key role in creating long-term bonds between voles, and assumed to be the same between different humans. Low numbers of these receptors seem to not encourage monogamous behavior, and when those receptors are activated, the behavior engaged within the species is that of someone on drugs such as cocaine. Love has been shown to be acting like a drug. The biological basis of long-term relationships has been shown, and it seems that it doesn't exist only in human beings, but is of course present in other monogamous species as well, with not as complex of a neurochemistry as perhaps found on our brains. The unfortunate problem with such experiments and research is that it puts predictions for human beings, as we're also members of the mammal family and subject to the same basic neurochemistry. But we don't know how much this is applicable because experimentation with human beings is not really ethical. It may seem that, as with everything, we're drawing too long of conclusions on the matter, but we know for a fact that we also have vasopressin receptors in our brain. We also know for a fact that the vasopressin receptor has a long microsatellite sequence surrounding it. We also know that the pathways activated during the love spell involve areas of addiction and dopaminergic pathways. Therefore, we can make the predictions that perhaps the activation of these receptors along with the distribution is perhaps varied in the brain of individuals. Now, as to how much this varies in a population of 7 billion people, I would predict quite a bit. However, since we do not have human brain experimental models, we can only draw these conclusions from this research. In general, we are to assume that the distribution of these receptors in our brains and their locations would be similar or have similar effects as to that of voles that engage in monogamous relationships. However, due to the association that the system has with the addiction pathways and our general longevity, these relationships would usually take the form of perhaps serial monogamy, lasting a medium duration of perhaps so many years, such as 7 to 10 years. The problems with hypergamy and the changes due to equality can of course not be highlighted enough. However, when we do assign blame to women, we must also understand that in the basis of our biology as men, there is also a deeper problem, which is this seen with the association of long-term pair bonding, the vasopressin receptors and the addiction pathways, which are also involved in this process. Both men and women seem to not be designed for "and they lived happily ever after." Biology, when it comes to these things, is indeed sexist, and we cannot predict what would be the distinct differences in the experience from the activation of these receptors between men and women. But the associated pathways when it comes to the so-called love spell, to my knowledge, seem to be quite similar. Therefore, I tend to predict quite a good correlation between the feelings felt, but perhaps there would be a distinct difference in the quality of those feelings between men and women. After all, they seem to be activated by different things. When it comes to the longevity of these feelings, due to the highly variable microsatellite sequence surrounding these genes, I would predict that the feelings would last varying lengths of time between two people. What we can definitely say for sure, as seen from this research, is that human beings have not been designed for relationships that go on forever and forever. Bummer, right? Anyway, that's all I had to say. I think it's been a good year so far. I will see you guys when I see you and if I see you again. And PS, make decisions for yourselves and don't let anyone dictate how you should live your life. Only you are you, and only you know how you should live your own life. Take care, guys, and goodbye.